Hello there and welcome to what might be a bit of an interesting video because I've got a bit of a confession to make. You see, I've never been that interested in costume dramas. So for the first time this season, I've not actually been looking forward to this week's episode of Doctor Who. Of course, the costume drama is only the setting, and there are plenty of questions to be asked about who this rogue fellow is. Questions, in fact, have been circulating all week, and the speculation on whether he's another Time Lord or the reincarnation of Captain Jack. In all honesty, even that hasn't piqued my interest this week. But I'm hoping that my opinion will change when I've actually seen the show. Now, there will be spoilers in this video, so that if you haven't seen the episode yet, then please do consider watching that first. Until then, let's find out what happens when the Doctor tries to stop a big bird from grabbing a ball as we go beyond the sofa. Hello, weary travellers. Well, definitely weary if you've been sat up watching Doctor Who all night. Welcome back if you've been here before, and if you haven't, welcome to this first video. Now, in previous weeks, I've gone over the response to episodes and the viewing figures and things. This week, I think it's probably better to talk about something a little bit different, and that's something that I found very personal, very difficult to deal with, and that's the loss of William Russell. He was one of the first companions, not only a long-standing veteran of the show, but somebody who was greatly respected and who will be sorely missed. He had a prolific career in television, film and theatre spanning over 7 decades. My mum actually remembered him from his first role as Sir Lancelot, and she never remembers any of the Doctor Who actors, usually. His film career included roles in notable productions such as They Who Dare, The Man Who Never Was, The Great Escape, and he's got a very, very, very minor part in Superman the movie as well. On television, he appeared in various series and specials including Disraeli, Testament of Youth, Coronation Street, and he had a rich theatre career as well, performing with the RSC, the National and the Globe. He continued to be involved with Doctor Who over the years, contributing to audiobooks and special episodes, and was of course featured in The Power of the Doctor. His contribution to the arts has left an indelible mark, and he will be remembered fondly by fans and colleagues alike. Now, before I get to the actual review, I'd like to share something a bit personal with you all. So if you don't want to listen to this bit, and that's perfectly fine, then there'll be a way to skip it. There'll be a timestamp or whatever. You can go straight to the review. But this death has affected me more than it probably should have done. I didn't know William Russell. I've never met him. All week I've seen people talking about the times that they worked with him or when they met him at conventions and things. And I know that this death has been more personal for them than it could ever have been for me. But this is coming at the end of a very difficult time. I lost my father nearly 2 years ago. The anniversary is actually coming up at the beginning of next month. And in that time, I've actually gone to 18 other funerals. We had one last week for a neighbour, and this Tuesday was another one for another neighbour. I've lost friends, I've lost family, and it's just been too much. It's had a massive toll on my mental health. And grief is cumulative. And every time you get another one, it like adds what feels like this burden that you have to carry. And I think that's probably why my mind hasn't really been on Doctor Who this week and why I've not really been looking forward to this episode. And I just wanted to say, if you're affected by this death or by anything that's connected with the show, then that's all right. You know, you'll hear somebody say, oh, it's just a show, or, well, you never knew them. But they don't understand that these people infect our lives, that they're right there in the big flashing box in the corner of our rooms. And because we watch the episodes again and again and again and again, they are constant companions to us. And when they're suddenly not there, it does make a difference. So if you've been upset by the news this week, I want you to know you're not alone. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with feeling like that. It is perfectly normal. It's perfectly human. And let's face it, it's what the Doctor would expect from us. Okay, so sorry, look. If you've tuned in for a nice bouncy video, and, well, it's not been that yet, has it? So briefly, let's cover what happened during the week. Dot and Bubble has been very well received by fans and people. I'm convinced that that performance at the end that Ncuti gave is going to be given some sort of award, even if it's just a Welsh BAFTA. And, you know, I'm not just saying Welsh BAFTAs, they're awful, aren't they? No, I'm just saying that because it deserves more, you know. In terms of viewing figures, it got 2.12 million. Not great, but we have to see what the consolidated adds on. Interestingly, 73 Yards got a bit of a boost this week, and it's entirely possible that that boost happened because of Boom. So with viewing figures, you often see that the reaction to a good episode is more people watching the following week, and I think that's what we're seeing here, and that it did give 73 Yards a big boost compared to previous weeks. Now, I'm quite happy to admit that Doctor Who as a brand is not at its best at the moment. It's been hurt by decisions in the past, and if it's going to grow, and I think really we all want to see it grow, then it's got to do a really big job again to convince people to give it another chance. And if they're giving it a chance and they're seeing, you know, some of the episodes that we've had this year, we might be in a good place. The only problem I do have is seeing the reaction to some people that I know who aren't Doctor Who fans themselves, but have got kids who are the right age to become Doctor Who fans. They've said that their kids just weren't interested. They said they turned it off. And that, to me, feels like it's more important than, you know, viewing figures or things like that. If Doctor Who isn't engaging kids, it's not doing its job properly. There's a few things that might happen here. The show could pivot, try to engage an older audience. The only problem with that is that older audiences are harder to engage because they've already have some experience with the franchise. Ultimately, wherever this ends, I've got no idea. But it will be interesting seeing what happens in the long run, how the show develops over the next few years. So, look, I've waffled on far too far in this video. Let's get into the bread and butter of why we're here and talk about Rogue. Rogue opens in 1813, where a shape-shifting creature is taking the place of people at a high society ball. The Doctor runs into a brooding figure called Rogue and is mistaken for this creature. But who is the mysterious Rogue? Well, he's a bounty hunter. And that's it. There's nothing more interesting to him than that. I really didn't enjoy this episode. It might be me, and like I said at the beginning of the video, might not be in the right frame of mind for this episode at all, but there were too many things in it that didn't quite fit for me. But I want to start off by talking about some stuff that I did like. Because first, Indira Varma. Now, I'll probably be a little bit unfair about this, because she's recently read the Terry Pratchett audiobooks of the Witches series, and she did a really good job. And obviously, being a massive Terry Pratchett fan, I've got the Discworld here. Look, I've got the world in the palm of my hand. So it's a bit of a thrill to see an actor who you know for doing one thing in something else. She's famous for doing other stuff anyway. Her performance was really well timed, really on point, and I think that she brought the character to life in the best way possible. And also, there was a really lovely line that the Doctor said.
Why keep going?
Because we have to. We have to live each day because they can't.
With everything that's happened this week, I thought that was really poignant, even though clearly it wasn't written to be in quite that way. This episode was written by Kate Herron and Bryony Redman, and I did think at one point they might be getting groomed to run the show later on. Kate, of course, has got a lot of experience working on Loki, so it wouldn't be outside the realms of possibility to get new writers in who eventually you're going to pass the torch on to. And one of the reasons that I thought this was because in this whole series, the only other writers have been showrunners. And I'd love to say that I enjoyed it. The fact is, there are some really good bits in the script. The monster itself is really well thought out, and it's a good addition to the pantheon of Doctor Who creatures. Giant birds that can shapeshift is right in the Doctor Who wheelhouse. The problem is that this just didn't quite feel like Doctor Who. And I hate to say it, but the script felt a little amateurish. I mean, you've got a character called Rogue who took his name from Dungeons and Dragons. We know this, not just because of the dice, but because of the roll initiative line. And yet, he doesn't know what cosplay is. Now, look, I'm far too old to know what an 18-year-old would understand, but it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility for somebody living in this generation to know what cosplay is, even if they're not the sort of person who's into that culture. And of course the Doctor's across everything, so of course he's going to know what it is. So having the Doctor and Ruby understand the reference makes perfect sense. The reference is clearly there to guide the audience as a sort of shortcut to what's actually happening. Whether that's needed or not, I don't know. Audiences are aware of things like shapeshifters. Do you really need the epithet to explain to people that they like to try on other people's bodies for fun? Because with it, you have this really strange moment where somebody who probably should know what the phrase cosplay means has no idea, and the alien creatures who probably shouldn't know what the phrase means use the phrase themselves. And it's the little things in this script, it's the minutiae that doesn't seem to connect well together. Overall, it gives me a feeling of something that really just needed that one extra polish, that one extra run through. You know, I'm going to have to stop the tape because I'm just going to ramble for a second. But when I was writing, one of the things that we would always do, the very, very last thing that you do, when you're doing comedy, you go through the script and you do a thing called ticking the laughs, where you see how many laughs you've got or you expect on each page of dialogue, because you need a certain sort of hit rate as you're going through a script. But when we were doing it and we were sort of going outside the realms of that, we'd go, okay, what are your audience's assumptions? And we'd list out all of the audience's assumptions. And then we'd move from where we were, which is, the script as it was, and figure out if the audience's assumptions are the assumptions that we want them to make as they're going through there. And if there's any dialogue that's out of place, this script could have done with something like that, I'm afraid. At least that's what it felt like. Because as far as the big picture stuff goes, this was great. There's some nice moments between Rogue and the Doctor, especially the entering the TARDIS bit, which is, it's always a bit of a joy to watch, somebody come into the TARDIS for the first time. And I love the way that they used pure imagination in that section as well. Somebody pointed out Ncuti wanted to be either the Doctor or Willy Wonka, and there we go. So that fits in well, and I like the way that they made the comparison between Rogue and the Doctor. It was nice seeing how somebody who was in a very similar situation to the Doctor is actually making different decisions and making mistakes that the Doctor probably made before. Not cleaning around, for example. I can imagine somewhere down the line, the Doctor went through a particular phase of his life where he didn't clean around. In fact, this whole thing kind of plays out like an episode of Bridgerton. You have that kind of, you've got the Regency setting. You've got a meeting with a strange man. You've got the falling in love. Okay, perhaps you don't have 6-foot-tall alien birds in your typical Jane Austen. But a good part of this episode was more to do with the gossip and the scandal than it was any alien plot. I actually thought the most interesting part of the episode was Ruby's B-plot. The fact that she uses her modern sensibilities, like Sense and Sensibility, right? In order to help somebody who thought that they were in real trouble. Of course, she turned out to be a bird creature too, but you can't really have everything, can you? We got a nice Chekhov's gun moment here as well. Chekhov's gun is when you tell the audience about something and then you get that something gets used as a plot point later on. And in this instance, it's the earrings, which have got a battle mode. And we've no idea what battle mode does, just that the Doctor says not to use it. Of course, when backed into the corner, Ruby uses battle mode to get herself out of trouble. What's more, this rather cleverly ties into the final dilemma where the Doctor thinks that Ruby has been taken over by a shapeshifter, and it turns out that she hasn't. In fact, you could say that Ruby was cosplaying the cosplayers. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people are going to love this because of the setting, because of the subject matter and everything. It's something that Doctor Who fans are really going to like, and you've got really nice creatures in there to add to that threat level. Oh, I should say, the special effects makeup for the desiccated corpses, which you can buy in Sainsbury's, by the way. desiccated corpses. They were excellent. I've seen things like that in horror films before, proper horror films. And in this instance, I thought they were actually a little bit scarier. And the only way they're getting away with it, of course, is because they're not showing the bodies on screen for a long period of time. They're only giving glimpses of the thing. The pieces are here for an incredible episode. And I did like the moment where we saw all of the Doctor's old faces. It was interesting seeing Richard E. Grant in the mix as well. And that seems to be the thing that most people are talking about as well. Rogue himself seems to be an attempt to do the Captain Jack character in a new way. The problem is it doesn't quite work out like that. And I'm not sure that there was enough charisma to pull this character back through in years to come. Look, are we going to be sitting around a campfire at some point talking about Rogue? I'd suggest that, you know, if it's just this story that he appears in, he'll likely end up on one of those videos with the titles, "That Moment the Doctor Met a Fellow Time Traveller." I mean, I presume he's a time traveller. The Doctor mentions something about researching the era properly, which implies Rogue is meant to be able to travel through time in some way, shape or form. And of course, we had the Dungeons and Dragons and the Kylie Minogue playing on in the spaceship as well. But the Doctor didn't pick up on that at all. And even in the Doctor Who universe, time travel is something that's relatively scarce. Not every Tom, Dick and Harry sort of rushes about the time vortex in the same way that the Doctor can. So even though he's a Time Lord, it's still rare for the Doctor to meet another time traveller. And you would have thought that that might have come up in the conversation. I suppose that's the sort of thing that I mean about having another polish for the script. And I think those are the sort of conversations that we'd like to hear as an audience. And don't get me wrong, the conversation between Rogue and the Doctor works really well. You see what seems to be a burgeoning relationship happening right in front of your eyes. Now, ignore the fact that I don't really like the Doctor having any sort of relationship on screen. Adjunct of that, I think they did a really good job here. It was the one part of the episode that I thought was spot on, incredibly well realized, you know. The ending, however, it just didn't work for me. And I guess, well, the stakes were there. You have that lovely reveal that Ruby hasn't been taken over by one of the shapeshifters and that she is, in fact, Ruby. She's stuck in this trap which will send her and the other bird creatures, I keep forgetting what their name is, to some random dimension somewhere, and it's stopped by a rugby tackle. Now, I know that sounds silly, but I thought we'd established earlier in the episode that once in one of these things, you can't get out of it. It was deadlock sealed and everything. Okay, Doctor Who has, on many occasions, written people out of trouble in pretty convoluted ways. The thing is, I had hoped we were getting beyond that now. And actually, this goes back to something that I was talking about earlier, the Chekhov's gun moment. Think about it like this. If we'd established earlier on that it was possible to swap an entity in one of these traps, then it wouldn't have felt unearned when we got to the end of the episode and it happened. Instead, what was established was once you're in one of these traps, you can't get out of it. Sure, you can pass items out of the trap, but if you're stuck there, the only way out is for somebody outside to deactivate the trap. Instead, they add this random get out of jail free card for being able to switch people out. And it felt sloppy and unearned. And yet you've got a scene, you have a scene where this technology is shown beforehand. You could have established it then. I don't know, perhaps I'm not in the right frame of mind to be watching the show this week. And certainly too many parts of the script were pulling at me, were taking me away from the show. And you know, taking me out of the experience of watching it. And other than that, I like a lot about this episode. I like that they've essentially taken an episode of Bridgerton and forced it into the shape of Doctor Who. It's a nice way of doing a genre piece without having everything, hammering it into the shape of science fiction. And I just wish I could be more enthused about it. That's what I think anyway. Please do let me know what you think in the comments below. I should say, I have had a problem reading some of the comments this week. I got quite a few comments on the last video, and whilst I can respond to a few of them, I don't have the time to keep responding to new messages, especially when there's, lots of text. I do try and read everything through, and I do appreciate everybody's time in commenting. And I would love to know what your thoughts on this episode are, so please do leave a comment. I'll try and get around to responding to it this week. I can't promise anything, I'm sorry. But that's it for another video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know this probably wasn't the same as the reviews that I've been putting out recently. But next week, we find out what's been going on with Susan Twist. And by the look of it, we're going to get to see Unit back as well, which includes Mel Bush. So it should be an interesting watch. And I know there's probably a joke somewhere about a bird in the hand being better than two in Mel Bush, but I can't quite think of what it is at the moment, and it's very late. So thank you ever so much for watching. And please do join me next time we go Beyond the Sofa.